The galaxy had moved on. Empires rose and fell, but the coalition endured, a behemoth of diplomacy, bureaucracy, and muscle. Its enforcers, genetically enhanced and smugly superior, were the long arm of order. Where they arrived, rebellion ended. At least, that was the story. On the edge of known space, on a mining colony not even worth naming, they arrived again, this time to clean up what they believed was a crash site involving smugglers. The miners had triggered a distress beacon, and the enforcers answered it with sneers and boots polished enough to reflect the stars. They didn't expect him. He stood behind the landing bay fence, arms crossed. An old Earthborn man, leaning heavier on one leg than the other. His jacket was patched with synthetic fiber, scorched at the shoulder. His eyes were unreadable. A long scar ran down the left side of his face, not from a ceremonial duel or some noble battlefield, but something rougher, dirtier. Less poetic. The enforcers clocked him immediately. A few laughed. "You call this your security?" one of them muttered to a miner. "He's former military," the miner offered, unsure whether to be proud or apologetic. Another enforcer stepped forward, smirking. "What war? The Great Retreat of Sol? Or that lovely fiasco on Harkos 4, where your kind screamed surrender before the first volley landed?" The broken soldier said nothing. His gaze passed over the newcomers, resting briefly on their two clean weapons, their chrome-plated armor. Everything about them gleamed. Untouched by dirt, unsullied by real combat. He blinked slowly. They weren't here to help. They were here to posture. He turned and walked toward the western perimeter. They let him go, dismissing him like they might a malfunctioning droid. Inside the outpost's mess hall, the enforcers spread their arrogance like oil and water. They insulted the colony's infrastructure, mocked the rations, laughed at the makeshift infirmary. The miners bore it in silence. They were used to being overlooked. Earth's colonies always were. The coalition had granted humanity observer status in their Grand Galactic project, a polite way of saying, "Sit in the back, don't talk." The broken soldier had arrived here 4 months prior, quietly hired after a mining skiff was ripped apart by unknown hostiles in the outer tunnels. Officially, they said it was seismic activity. But the skiff's internal cameras, though corrupted, had shown movement. Something with limbs. Many limbs. He didn't share that with anyone. He just requested 2 surplus drones and started mapping weak points in the western approach. Most days, he patrolled alone, eating dried root paste from a pouch, sleeping in shifts. The miners didn't ask questions. They knew pain when they saw it. The man's gait was that of someone familiar with lasting damage. Synthetic joints, maybe. Or just trauma too deep to smooth out. One night, the bartender asked him where he was stationed before this. He gave a single answer, Cairo's Belt. Then drank until he passed out. Cairo's Belt had been the site of the longest losing war humans had ever fought. They lost 72% of their deployed forces. Survivors were rarely willing to talk about it. The ones who did were never the same. So, when he walked alone toward the source of the beacon, none followed. He moved with deliberate caution, scanning the terrain. The ship had struck hard, half buried into the ridge like a thrown dagger. No smoke, no fire. Just silence and metal. He saw the claw marks first. Long, deep gouges in the hull. Not from the crash, these came after. Something had tried to open it. And succeeded. A trail of black, sticky residue led into the canyon, thick like coagulated tar. He crouched and touched it. Still warm. When he returned to the outpost, the enforcers were suiting up, laughing about exotic salvage and bonus compensation for recovering coalition property. He gave his report. Something hostile came out of that wreck. It's not pirates. They laughed again. One of them asked if he needed a stim injection to calm his nerves. Another imitated a human scream. The colony supervisor asked him quietly if it was serious. He only nodded. The enforcers left at dawn, 9 of them in powered armor. By mid-morning, 2 screamed over the comms before their feeds went dark. The remaining 7 withdrew in confusion, blaming equipment failure and low visibility. The soldier sat near the gate, cleaning a sidearm the enforcers had laughed at the night before. It was human-made. Ugly. Worn. But reliable. "You think we need your antique toy?" one spat as they limped past him. "We're recalibrating, not retreating." He looked up, expression flat. "You're not ready." The commander turned, fury in his voice. "For what? A dust storm? A broken hatchling? We are the enforcement. We don't retreat." He didn't reply. His hands continued checking the weapon with mechanical precision. That night, the outpost sirens wailed. Something had entered the lower levels. The feed cut out 10 seconds after a shriek pierced through the comm line. No one moved. The enforcers froze. One of them whispered, "It's inside?" The soldier stood, slid a magazine into place, and finally spoke. "Not yet. But it will be." Then he walked into the dark. Alone. The first kill was silent. A patrol enforcer, still recalibrating his visor, vanished between sensor pings. No comms, no alarm, just a brief distortion and then nothing. The others laughed it off, blaming the storm interference. But the soldier knew. He'd seen how they moved, how they started, never all at once. They probed first, mapped the fear, isolated the weakest. He had fought this pattern before. The Shalkra weren't here to conquer. They were here to feed. An hour later, a second enforcer disappeared. This time, they found the helmet. Crushed inward. Organic residue clung to the metal, slowly eating through the alloy. The commander barked orders, tightened formations, and cursed the soldier for spreading paranoia. But they were already behind. The enemy had entered their rhythm. The enforcers were reacting, not fighting. The soldier was already moving. He bypassed the upper decks and activated lockdowns on the engineering tunnels. He redirected power to arc conduits and set overload protocols. If they got in, they wouldn't leave cleanly. He laid shrapnel charges along the secondary access shafts, rigged from broken mining gear. It wasn't doctrine. It was desperation honed into discipline. 3 hours passed. No more attacks. The enforcers believed the threat had passed. They reset their patrol routes and resumed sarcastic commentary. But the soldier didn't rest. He knew this was when they gathered. The Shalkra always waited until confidence returned. Then they swarmed. When the swarm came, it didn't start with howls or screeches. It started with power loss. Every light blinked once. Then went dark. Backup systems failed to kick in. Even the air compressors faltered. A calculated blackout. They knew human infrastructure now. They'd learned it somewhere. Motion sensors lit up across the lower sector, hundreds of moving objects. Not running, not sprinting. Crawling. Coordinated. Efficient. The enforcers panicked. They broke formation, shouted over each other, fired blindly into empty halls. Their precision collapsed under pressure. None of their training accounted for this kind of enemy, fast, silent, unpredictable. By the time they regrouped near the control center, 5 were dead. Another 2 unresponsive. That left 2 standing. And the soldier, watching from a shadowed doorway. He didn't speak. Just moved past them with his gear slung tight and a thermal detonator in hand. One of them reached out, trying to reassert command, but the words died in his throat when he saw the soldier's eyes, not wild, not emotional. Just focused. He slipped through emergency crawlways, past fallen bodies and shredded armor. The Shalkra were deep inside now. Cutting power had been step 1. Next would be communication suppression. After that, total saturation. He reached the lower storage deck, sealed the blast doors behind him, and activated the emergency override panel. Manual only. No networks, no systems. Just muscle and code. Outside, distant clanging echoed. They were testing the blast doors. Estimating weaknesses. Time was short. He primed the thermal charge and set it on a pressure plate, aligning it with the fuel line. If they breached here, they wouldn't take the reactor. They'd burn with it. From his earpiece, a faint voice crackled through static. One of the surviving enforcers. Panic in every word. They're inside, every level, can't see, what are they, where are you? He answered flatly. Buying time. The voice went silent. As the soldier climbed back toward the surface, he triggered each trap along the way. Controlled detonations collapsed tunnel intersections, forcing the swarm to bottleneck. He used proximity charges to redirect them, forcing them into kill zones. He reached the fabrication room and scavenged parts for an improvised railgun coil, rigged it to a fusion core, and mounted it through the broken window frame. It wasn't elegant. It didn't have to be. He calibrated range and fired once. The blast tore through 4 chakra, sending acidic gore across the corridor walls. The scream that followed wasn't pain. It was recognition. They knew he was different. The next wave came faster, smarter. They tested his fire rhythm, timed their rushes, tried to bait reloads. He adjusted. Used decoys. Blinded one with a flare, executed it with a blade. No wasted shots. No wasted motion. Every second counted. His side bled from a gash. His leg screamed with each step. But he moved forward, never retreating. Not because of pride, because retreat meant giving them ground. Giving them civilians. A mining assistant stumbled into the hallway, holding a wrench and shaking. She hadn't fled fast enough. A chakra dropped from the ceiling behind her. He fired. The shot ripped through the creature's chest before it struck. She screamed anyway, then ran. He didn't stop her. Didn't watch her go. Just reloaded and kept walking. By nightfall, the upper level was half ruined. Fires burned in vent shafts. Screams echoed below. The enforcers were down to 1, barely breathing, hiding under a table, clutching a scorched plasma rifle. The soldier dragged him out, handed him a sidearm, and pointed to the exit corridor. If you run now, you might make it. The man looked at him, confused. What about you? He chambered a fresh round. Not done yet. He moved toward the breach point without waiting for thanks. His boots dragged slightly now. Blood loss. Doesn't matter. They mocked him when he arrived. Now they hid behind the walls he defended. And he knew the worst was still coming. The corridor stank of burnt acid and scorched carbon fiber. The walls, once sterile white, were now painted in layers of gore and shrapnel scoring. The soldier stepped over the remains of an exosuit, crushed inward like tinfoil, and kept moving, sweeping corners with practiced economy. His pulse was steady. The noise had stopped. That meant they were regrouping. He reached the access tunnel leading to the outer perimeter and dropped a makeshift signal disruptor into the vent. Static pulsed across nearby comms. He didn't need to hear them. He needed them deaf. The chakra had adapted fast. Every attack since his first defense had been sharper, more deliberate. They tested response times, memorized firing angles, and now avoided the more obvious traps. Their numbers didn't thin, they simply became harder to kill. The soldier had countered by changing his own rhythm. No pattern lasted more than 2 engagements. If he used a blind corner once, he never returned to it. If they expected an ambush, he gave them none. When they rushed a choke point, he lured them back to collapse zones. He placed high-density charges at junctions they hadn't touched yet. Not to trap, to collapse retreat options. The more he restricted their movement, the more predictable their aggression became. He wanted them angry, not clever. His rifle was overheating. He switched to a bolt pistol, slower but cleaner. Every shot was aimed center mass, followed by 2 steps of movement. Fire, shift, fire, move again. They tracked stationary targets first. He rigged the fusion conduit above the ore lift to vent superheated gas into the access shaft. When the first wave tried climbing it, the pipe ruptured. Screeches filled the air. Bodies dropped, smoking and spasming. He didn't wait for them to finish dying. He shot them mid-fall. The upper colony lit in brief flashes of red and yellow, emergency lights, small fires, weapon discharge. No formal command structure remained. He used their chaos. He led a group of 6 survivors, miners, techs, and 1 terrified enforcer, through sub-tunnels. Along the way, he gave no comfort. Only orders. No one argued. At one point, a young technician froze when a skittering sound echoed behind them. The soldier didn't hesitate. He turned, fired once, and dragged the body of the pursuing Chakra into the shadows. Not a word spoken. The group kept moving. In the fabrication bay, he converted mining spikes into kinetic darts. Using a modified hydraulic punch, he turned the device into a silent close-range launcher. The next 2 Chakra that rounded the corner didn't even get to scream before half their heads caved in. He never used the same weapon twice in the same sector. Consistency invited counters. They adjusted to stimuli, but only if it repeated. By now, the Chakra had split into specialized roles. He'd seen it before: forward scouts with taloned limbs and armor-piercing carapace, flankers that moved along walls, almost flat to the surface, and heavy drones that burst through bulkheads like siege rams. All operated with singular focus: find, isolate, eliminate. He targeted the scouts first. Removing their eyes reduced their speed. Without forward recon, the horde became sluggish, relying on sound and vibration. He began using sound traps, dropped metal, false footsteps from speakers, plasma vents timed to vent just as they passed. Every misstep he caused meant a second longer for someone to escape. He didn't act like prey. That's what confused them. Every human they'd hunted before had fled. He advanced. Every time they tried to corner him, he was already behind them. Not faster. Smarter. Brutal. He found 2 children huddled in the coolant storage, shielded by a dead mining bot. One whispered for help. He nodded once, handed them a beacon, and rerouted power from the cooling grid into the northern elevator shaft. The shaft glowed orange from the redirected heat. No creature could survive the climb. When they were clear, he detonated the lower pulleys. The shaft collapsed, cutting off another access point. The colony map blinked red in over a dozen zones. He memorized the pattern. They were circling him now, drawing inward. They had finally decided he was the threat. Good. He began to centralize his resistance, forcing them to come through controlled corridors. He used narrow vent shafts for maximum damage radius on concussive grenades. He triggered ceiling collapses with wire tension traps and stacked crates rigged to fall on timed detonations. When one Chakra leapt down from the ceiling mid-sprint, he stepped aside and slammed a rebar spike through its thorax using a mechanical piston. They weren't used to being hunted. His body screamed for rest. Every joint burned. His left shoulder was partially dislocated, and a fracture ran up his forearm from an earlier recoil. He tightened the brace and ignored the pain. The only time that mattered was now. A faint voice came through the static. "You're still alive?" "We thought." He cut it off. "They're adapting." "Then you're losing?" He reloaded without breaking stride. "Not yet." He moved back toward the central access bay. He wasn't hoping to hold it. He was waiting for something else. They would come for him now, all of them. That was fine. He'd already set the stage. The swarm hit harder than before. No scattered scouts, no testing formations, just overwhelming mass. The central corridor shook with the force of their charge. The soldier waited until the last motion alarm tripped, then triggered the failsafe. A wave of kinetic shock exploded down the hall. Walls buckled, support beams snapped. The ceiling caved in. When the dust settled, 20 bodies lay crushed beneath rubble. More kept coming. He backpedaled through the fallback zone, arcing EMP grenades behind him to fry any neural relays. He'd seen a Shulkra corpse stand back up once, twitching on instinct alone. They didn't run on fear. They ran on programming. His sensors showed movement on the outer ridge. Not hostile. Atmospheric disturbance. Orbital activity. It wasn't the coalition. Their signals were too clean. These came staggered, encrypted in old Earth code. The soldier paused, catching the pattern. They weren't fleeing. They were dropping. The enemy paused too. Their charge faltered. The swarm hesitated. Not from confusion, from recognition. The first impact rattled the foundations. No finesse. No speeches. Just metal punching sky and burning through orbit. Dropships landed in unison across the ridgeline. Dust clouds rolled over the terrain. Then came the low thrum of kinetic boosters discharging in unison. He didn't need to look to know what that sound meant. Boots on the ground. Then came the signal, all channels, human task force deployed. He checked his comms. Encryption codes matched Earth's Special Contingency Group. Not the political front. Not diplomats. The kind they sent when survival, not optics, mattered. He stepped aside from the corridor's final checkpoint and began laying down motion beacons. The swarm had refocused, now splitting attention between him and the ridge. That split would cost them. The Marines arrived without ceremony. Their exoframes bore deep scars from prior deployments. Some units carried ancient rifles patched with duct coolant hoses and overclocked capacitors. No uniformity. No gleam. Only functionality. The first squad moved in with precision, clearing sectors by pressure zones. No words, no cheers. Just methodical action. One motion to the soldier. He nodded back. No names exchanged. None needed. They advanced together, leapfrogging fire lanes and sealing breaches behind them. Where the enforcers had scattered, the Marines spread purposefully. They didn't overextend. They didn't hesitate. Each kill was confirmed. Every shot had a reason. The soldier moved like gravity had lightened. His pace quickened. He had support now, but not soft reliance. Cohesion. He adjusted tactics immediately, knowing how these men fought. They shared the same language, not spoken, but built from experience. The Marines covered his flanks without being told. They recognized his loadout, compensated for his limits, exploited his openings. The Shulkra tried to overwhelm the new line, shifting to brute tactics. Larger drones rammed structures. Acid spit sprayed across walls. The Marines didn't falter. They adjusted weapon frequencies. They baited the heavy units into fire traps. One squad buried explosives inside a Shulkra corpse, luring others to investigate before detonating it mid-mass. The soldier watched one Marine drag a wounded comrade across fire while firing backwards with a shoulder-mounted cannon. No panic. Just calculation. They didn't retreat because it wasn't an option built into them. He rejoined the front with a heavy repeater ripped from a downed sentry unit. When his right shoulder gave out, he tied the strap tighter and let recoil reset his aim. A line of Shulkra attempted to flank the rear. He anticipated it, lured them into an old exhaust tunnel, and sealed the bulkhead with a plasma torch. Screams echoed until the air cooked out. They cleared the central deck in under an hour. Efficiency born of necessity. The Marines didn't celebrate. They checked ammo, patched wounds, reset formation. One enforcer, limping, stumbled into the staging area, staring wide-eyed at the humans covered in ash, blood, and sweat. He tried to speak, choked, then muttered, "How, did you hold them alone?" The soldier didn't answer. A Marine behind him did. He softened them up. Another voice crackled over comms, higher command. Backup forces were arriving in orbit. Coalition ships now moved to assist. The Marine commander replied flatly, "Don't need M." The soldier watched the horizon. Smoke rose where the Shulkra had fled underground. He pointed once. The Marines followed without hesitation. No one issued an order. He paused only long enough to reload. Then continued forward. The worst wasn't over. Not yet. But the tide had turned. He hadn't survived because of luck or rage or stubbornness. He survived because that's what humans did best when cornered: endure, adapt, and strike back harder. The colony smoldered beneath a low haze of chemical smoke and scorched dirt. The last Shalkra nest had been purged, its tunnels collapsed and incinerated with thermal charges. The scent of plasma and metal hung heavy in the air. Silence settled, thick and unfamiliar, broken only by the occasional crackle of sparking wires and the distant hiss of ruptured vents. The soldier walked through the wreckage with no ceremony. His rifle hung loosely from one hand, the other wrapped in blood-stained gauze. The survivors gathered near the staging post, dazed but alive. Miners, techs, junior security, all with dust-blackened faces and scorched uniforms. Their eyes followed him, not with fear or pity, but with something different now. Recognition. They had seen what he was when it mattered. Not a relic. Not broken. Just real. One of the engineers stepped forward to speak, hesitated, then simply nodded. That was enough. The enforcers, what was left of them, remained silent. No smugness. No orders barked. They had watched him hold the line when their doctrine failed. They had watched his backup arrive, not gleaming and ceremonial, but scarred, lethal, and loyal. Their silence wasn't guilt. It was understanding. A Marine approached, helmet under his arm, face expressionless. He handed the soldier a data chip. Final logs. Your kill ratio's on it. Not that you need it. The soldier accepted it without comment. He had no use for numbers. They didn't tell the story. Orders came down from Coalition High Command within hours. The Shalkra incursion was to be classified as an isolated incident. Official reports would commend joint defensive efforts and commendations would be evenly distributed. That lie was typical. No one argued. Those who had seen the truth had it burned into memory, not paper. Evac shuttles landed the next day. Medical crews moved through the wreckage, scanning vitals and logging damage. The soldier refused treatment until every civilian was accounted for. Even then, he submitted only to field stabilization, enough to walk, shoot, and stay conscious. The rest could wait. A young Marine watched him from a distance before stepping closer. Barely out of training, fresh armor, nervous posture. He hesitated, then asked, "Sir, what were you before all this?" The soldier glanced at him, voice low. "Tired." The Marine frowned. "And now?" He looked toward the smoldering horizon, then back at the quiet survivors. "Still tired." No speeches followed. No titles granted. But stories spread faster than reports. Within hours, forward-listening posts started hearing chatter. Non-human species began whispering about the outpost, not for the incursion, but for the resistance. Not because it was saved, but how. A single human, holding the line against a swarm designed to break fleets. Alone, then reinforced by others who fought like him. The reputation spread further than any broadcast could carry. A new kind of fear had settled into the enemy's psyche. Coalition strategists began revising assessments. Human adaptability, once labeled erratic, was now noted as unpredictably effective. Morale resilience, previously dismissed, was logged under strategic asset potential. But behind closed doors, they said it more clearly: if one of them can do that, what happens when they all do? Back on Earth, recruitment spiked. Young volunteers no longer wanted medals or prestige. They wanted to be what that man was, not perfect, not invincible, just willing. The footage leaked. Grainy helmet cam clips, partial feeds of his lone engagements, the moment he held a breach solo with only a sidearm. People watched it on repeat. No dramatic soundtrack. No narration. Just silence, gunfire, and motion. The raw truth was enough. In time, the colony was rebuilt. A new security wall was installed, hardened turrets mounted, and new staff rotated in. But near the west ridge, a metal plate was embedded in the stone, etched by hand. No name, no rank. Just a phrase. He stayed. The soldier was gone by then. No one saw him board a transport. No requisition log showed departure. He didn't wait for recognition. That wasn't the point. He knew there'd be another breach. Another system forgotten. Another line that needed holding. And someone had to be first. Years later, a new recruit stepped onto a combat dropship, nervous hands tightening gear straps. She glanced around at the older veterans, spotted the name stenciled on one of their exopacks. The same one from the outpost logs. The legend. Her voice shook when she asked, "You knew him?" The veteran paused, then adjusted his rifle. "He's the reason I'm here." "But who was he?" He smiled without warmth. "Someone you don't want showing up after you fail." Because now the message was clear: when a human says, "Backup's here," it means the nightmare's over. For you. Not for them.